What if the CEO of Tesla walked into his own dealership, and no one knew who he was? Dressed as an ordinary customer, Elon Musk expected great service, but what he got instead left him speechless. Rude staff, VIP favoritism, and a shocking truth hidden behind closed doors. But here's the twist. Elon wasn't just there to buy a car, he was there to change everything. Stay tuned, because what happens next will leave you stunned. The showroom had a sleek, polished look, the kind of place designed to impress high-end buyers. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, reflecting off the glossy surfaces of the electric cars on display. The Tesla logo gleamed on the reception desk, where a young woman in a tailored uniform typed away on a computer. Not bothering to glance up, Elon Musk stepped inside, blending into the scene in a way that would have been impossible under normal circumstances. Dressed in an unremarkable beige button-down and well-worn khakis, his hair slightly disheveled, he looked nothing like the billionaire who shaped the modern auto industry. A pair of thick-rimmed glasses sat on his nose, completing the look of a modest high school teacher. A man with little interest in luxury. No one greeted him. To his left, a man in an expensive charcoal suit had barely set foot inside before a salesperson hurried over, offering a warm smile and an outstretched hand. A second employee quickly followed, holding a tablet at the ready, eager to walk him through the specs of the latest Model S. They spoke in hushed, respectful tones, as though he were royalty. Elon watched for a moment, noting the contrast. Then, he stepped forward, making his way toward the nearest vehicle, a sleek, midnight blue Model 3. He ran a hand along the car's smooth surface, waiting to see if someone would approach. Still, nothing. After a long pause, he turned toward the front desk and cleared his throat. The receptionist looked up with mild disinterest. "Excuse me," he said, "I'm interested in the Model 3. Could I speak with someone about it?" She gave him a once-over, barely concealing her skepticism. One moment. Without further acknowledgement, she tapped at her screen before returning to whatever she had been doing before he arrived. Elon exhaled through his nose, suppressing a smile. This was exactly what he had expected. A few minutes passed before a young salesperson finally approached. The man, mid-20s, sharp haircut, crisp Tesla uniform, offered a brief nod. "Looking for something specific?" he asked, his tone polite but uninterested. "Yes," Elon replied. "The Model 3. I've been considering buying one." The salesperson's posture shifted slightly. "Oh," he said, "right. Well, the Model 3 starts at..." He rattled off a price that was a full $10,000 higher than the actual base price. Elon raised an eyebrow. "That's higher than I expected." "Yeah, well, most customers opt for upgrades," the man said quickly. "The standard model isn't really what people go for. The better range, the full self-driving package, those things add up. You'd probably want those." "Would I?" Elon asked, amused. The man gave a small shrug, as if to say it wasn't his problem. "Most serious buyers do." Elon tilted his head. "Can I test drive one?" The response came instantly. "We only offer test drives for customers who have started the purchase process." "Is that so?" Elon asked, keeping his voice neutral. The man hesitated for a fraction of a second before nodding. "Company policy." Elon glanced toward the suited man across the showroom, now sliding into the driver's seat of a Model S while a salesperson chatted animatedly beside him. "Is it?" Elon mused. The young employee shifted on his feet. "The Model S and X are different," he said quickly. "We don't do casual test drives for the Model 3 unless we're sure someone is serious." Elon studied him, taking in the way his eyes flicked toward the receptionist, the subtle tension in his stance. He wasn't lying, but he wasn't entirely comfortable either. He let the silence stretch just long enough to make the man fidget. "I see," Elon said finally. "Thanks for your time." Without waiting for a response, he turned and walked further into the showroom, watching how the employees moved. The pattern was clear. Every time a well-dressed customer entered, someone greeted them immediately. Every time someone in casual attire walked in, they were left waiting, if they were acknowledged at all. Near the back, a group of employees stood in a loose circle, chatting quietly. As Elon passed, one of them, a woman with dark hair pulled into a tight bun, gave him a quick glance before looking away just as fast. There was something about her reaction. It wasn't just disinterest, it was discomfort. Interesting. Elon made his way toward another Model 3 and ran his fingers along the door handle, pretending to examine the car. But his mind was elsewhere. There was more to this than just a couple of inattentive salespeople. There was a system at play, one designed to favor certain buyers over others. And he intended to find out why. Elon lingered by the Model 3, trailing his fingers along the smooth surface as if he were deep in thought. In reality, he was watching, listening. The patterns of behavior in this showroom were too obvious to ignore. He had been disregarded, fed misleading information, and outright denied a test drive. Now, he needed to see just how far this so-called policy extended. He turned back to the young salesman, who had barely concealed his impatience the first time they spoke. "I have a few more questions," Elon said, his tone even. "Could you tell me about the battery life and the warranty details? I want to know exactly what I'd be paying for." The salesman hesitated before responding. "Well, the Model 3 comes with a standard battery, but most people upgrade to the long-range version. Warranty covers the basics." Elon tilted his head. "What do you mean by the basics?" The salesman shrugged. "Standard coverage. If something major happens, you'd have to bring it in." Elon remained silent, waiting to see if the man would elaborate. He didn't. "What about the software?" Elon pressed. "How often does it update? Do I have full access? Or are certain features locked behind an extra cost?" The salesman exhaled through his nose, clearly wishing this conversation would end. "The car updates automatically. It's all in the package." "Which package?" There was a flicker of frustration in the salesman's eyes. "Look, most people who are serious about buying don't get caught up in the details. The premium package is what you'd want." Elon let out a quiet chuckle. "You don't think details matter when you're spending thousands of dollars?" The salesman forced a tight smile. "I mean, it's just..." Before he could finish, the entrance doors slid open, and a tall, older man in an expensive navy blazer walked in. Immediately, a second salesman, who had been idly checking his phone, perked up and rushed over. "Welcome, sir." The salesman practically beamed. "Looking for something specific today?" Elon watched as the well-dressed man barely had to say a word before being ushered toward a gleaming black Model S within seconds. He was handed the key fob. "Take your time with the test drive," the salesman told him, patting the car's hood like an old friend. "No rush at all." Elon turned back to the young salesman standing in front of him. "I thought you said test drives were only for serious buyers." The man hesitated, adjusting the collar of his shirt. "Well, the Model S is different," Elon finished for him. "Right." He slipped his phone from his pocket and discreetly started recording. This wasn't just one careless employee making a mistake, this was a pattern. A few minutes later, Elon approached the reception desk. "I'd like to speak with the manager." The receptionist barely looked up. "There's no one available right now." "Then I'll wait," she sighed, as if he were making an unreasonable demand. "It could take a while." "That's all right, I've got time." Something flickered in her expression. Not concern, just mild irritation. Before she could say anything else, a voice near Elon's shoulder spoke softly. "I wouldn't waste my time if I were you." Elon turned his head. Standing near the edge of the reception area was a young employee. No older than 25. He wore the same uniform as the others, but his posture was stiff, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. Elon studied him. "Why's that?" The young man hesitated, glancing toward the other employees before lowering his voice. "The manager won't talk to you. He doesn't deal with, cases like this." "Cases like this?" Elon echoed. The employee looked uncomfortable. "There's a system. Certain customers are prioritized. The rest, well, they get the runaround." Elon's jaw tightened. "Meaning what, exactly?" The employee hesitated again, but Elon didn't press. He already knew. The showroom had an unspoken rule: wealth determines service. A slow realization settled in. This wasn't just about rude employees. It was a policy. Elon turned back toward the showroom floor, eyes scanning for anything out of place. Then, near one of the sales kiosks, he spotted it. A laminated chart pinned to a bulletin board behind the counter. It was small, easy to overlook, but when he focused, he could make out two columns. One listed different spending brackets. The other, various levels of customer service priority. So there it was. Elon faced the young employee again. Thanks for the heads up. The man gave a quick nod and hurried away before anyone noticed him talking too much. Elon exhaled, already making his next move. He stepped toward the nearest salesperson, one he hadn't spoken to yet. I'd like to buy a Model 3, he said plainly. Right now. The salesman's expression flickered with surprise. But he quickly recovered. Oh, great. We can start that process. Elon pulled out his wallet. Let's do it. The salesman hesitated for just a moment before leading him toward a desk. He tapped at the computer, pulling up an order form. But then, something changed. The man's fingers slowed. He glanced at the screen, brows furrowing. That's strange. Elon leaned forward. Problem? The salesman hesitated. Our system seems to be down. I can't process a purchase right now. Elon kept his expression neutral. That's inconvenient. You sure it's not working? The man tapped again, then frowned deeper. Yeah, must be an issue with the network. These things happen. Elon sat back, his suspicions confirmed. This wasn't a glitch, it was a stall tactic. He pulled out a sleek, black credit card and placed it on the table. The salesman's eyes flicked toward the name embossed in silver lettering. Elon Musk. A visible jolt ran through the man's shoulders. His throat bobbed as he swallowed. Elon smiled, but there was nothing warm about it. Maybe I should introduce myself. The air inside the showroom shifted the moment the young salesman's eyes landed on the credit card. The realization dawned slowly, creeping up his face as he read the name again, as if hoping he'd misread it the first time. His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. Elon Musk, he murmured, barely above a whisper. A ripple of confusion spread through the employees nearby. A few turned their heads. Others simply stared, waiting for some kind of confirmation. The receptionist at the front desk sat frozen, her fingers hovering above the keyboard. Then came the chaos. The salesman stepped back abruptly, his chair scraping against the tile floor. He muttered something about needing a moment before disappearing behind a partition wall. In less than a minute, murmurs escalated into hushed conversations, then into frantic movement. Employees whispered to one another, eyes darting toward Elon, some avoiding eye contact altogether. One man, dressed in a fitted navy blue blazer, emerged from the far side of the showroom. His steps were measured, his expression composed, but there was a tightness around his mouth. Robert Kane. Elon recognized the type immediately. The kind of manager who thrived in an environment built on appearances, where power was determined not by skill but by who could control the narrative. Kane was older, mid-50s, with the calculated confidence of someone who had handled more than a few PR nightmares. He approached with an easy, practiced smile. There seems to be some confusion, Kane said smoothly, his voice carrying the kind of warmth reserved for damage control. If I had known you were visiting, we would have prepared a much better experience for you. Elon held his gaze. I'd rather see how customers are actually treated. Kane barely missed a beat. I assure you, we take customer experience very seriously. If there's been any misunderstanding, I'd be happy to discuss it privately. He gestured toward a set of glass-walled offices at the back of the showroom. Elon didn't move. No need, he said. We'll handle this right here. A flicker of unease crossed Kane's face before he recovered. I'm sure we can come to an understanding, he said. We already have, Elon replied. He pulled his phone from his pocket and tapped the screen. Within seconds, audio filled the showroom. A familiar voice played back, one of the salesmen from earlier. We only offer test drives for customers who are serious buyers. Then another recording, this time a hushed exchange from the receptionist. The manager won't talk to you. He doesn't deal with cases like this. The sound quality was clear, undeniable. Around the showroom, customers and employees alike stood in silence, some shifting uncomfortably. Kane's jaw tensed. That's not. Elon cut him off by holding up a printed document, waving it just enough for the nearest employees to see. A spreadsheet, 2 columns. On one side, income brackets. On the other, service priority levels. You have a system, Elon said, his voice steady. Customers are sorted before they even get a chance to speak. He turned the page so Kane could see it clearly, and it came from inside this showroom. For the first time, Kane hesitated. It was brief, but Elon caught the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Then, Kane squared his shoulders. This is just an internal guideline, he said. It's not official company policy. The words were too fast, too rehearsed. A sharp breath came from the side. The young employee who had warned Elon earlier, Michael, judging by his name tag, stepped forward. His face was tight, his fists clenched at his sides. That's not true, Michael said. A hush fell over the showroom. Michael's voice was steadier than Elon expected. We're told which customers to prioritize. If we don't follow it, we lose commissions. If we push upgrades, we're rewarded. Kane's expression hardened. That's enough. Michael ignored him. Some customers are denied test drives just because of how they look. I've seen people with the money to buy a car right then and there get turned away just because they don't fit the showroom's image. More employees shifted uncomfortably. Some avoided eye contact. Others exchanged looks, as if debating whether to speak up themselves. A new voice broke the silence. This isn't just unethical, a man said. It's illegal. The man stepped forward from the crowd, mid-50s. Salt and pepper hair, dressed in a well-tailored but modest gray suit. The same customer Elon had seen earlier being brushed aside. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small leather wallet. Flipping it open to reveal a business card. Consumer Protection Attorney. The color drained from Kane's face. I specialize in cases like this. The man continued, his voice calm but firm. What you're describing is a direct violation of consumer rights, not to mention discriminatory business practices. A murmur rippled through the room. Some customers instinctively stepped back, while employees seemed to shrink under the weight of the revelation. Elon turned back to Kane. I don't care what you think this is, he said. Tesla doesn't do business like this. The authority in his voice left no room for argument. Kane's fingers twitched at his sides. His carefully constructed composure was cracking. I think it's time we take a look at the sales records. Elon continued, and every transaction from the past year. Kane's breath hitched. That's not necessary. I'll decide that, Elon said. You're suspended, effective immediately. The silence in the room was deafening. Kane's face went pale, his lips parted as if to argue. But he thought better of it. Instead, his hand darted toward his pocket, his phone. Before he could lift it, a Tesla security guard, who had been standing quietly by the entrance, stepped forward. Hand it over, the guard said. Kane hesitated just a second too long. The guard's stance stiffened. Slowly, reluctantly, Kane set the phone on the desk. Elon exhaled, finally allowing himself a breath. He turned back toward the crowd, employees still frozen, customers watching with wide eyes. This is going to change, he said, and he meant it. The air inside the showroom had changed. The tense murmurs of employees mixed with the hushed voices of customers. All of them aware that something unusual was unfolding. A few people had their phones out, filming discreetly. Others whispered among themselves, casting nervous glances toward the front desk where Robert Kane stood. His jaw clenched so tightly it looked painful. It didn't take long for the news to spread beyond the showroom. Employees in other Tesla locations were already hearing about what had happened. Calls started coming in, first from nearby stores, then from across the region. Some were just trying to confirm the rumors, but others carried something heavier, unease. They had seen the same practices in their own showrooms. Some even admitted that they had been forced to turn customers away based on arbitrary guidelines. A group of customers, emboldened by what they had just witnessed, stepped forward. A middle-aged woman with short blonde hair, her arms crossed tightly, spoke first. I knew something was off, she said, her voice sharp. I came here last month looking to buy a Model 3. The salesman barely looked at me, said they didn't have any available for test drives. Now I know why. Another man, standing near the entrance, scoffed. Same thing happened to me. They just assumed I couldn't afford it. Didn't even let me finish my sentence before pushing me toward a used model instead. Others nodded in agreement. Frustration bubbled up in the room, turning into something close to outrage. Robert Kane's face reddened. He was cornered, and he knew it. For a moment, he stood still, assessing his options. Then, he did what men like him always did when they were backed into a corner. He tried to shift the blame. This is bigger than just me. he said, raising his hands as if to calm the room. Do you really think I came up with this system on my own? These policies didn't appear out of nowhere. The higher-ups knew. They approved it. A few employees exchanged uneasy looks. Elon remained still, watching Kane carefully. I'm not saying it's right, Kane continued, his voice taking on a pleading edge. But I didn't have a choice. This came from corporate. You think a single showroom manager could implement something like this without someone above signing off? His words hung in the air. Then, as if to prove his point, Kane pulled out his phone and dialed a number. He turned slightly, just enough so the screen wasn't visible. A few rings. Then a voice answered. Michael, it's Robert, he said quickly. We've got a situation here. The name meant nothing to most people in the room, but Elon recognized it immediately. Michael Harrington, a regional director, someone high enough to make decisions, but not so high that he couldn't be sacrificed if things got messy. Within half an hour, Harrington arrived. He was tall, well-dressed, carrying the effortless confidence of a man used to putting out fires before they spread too far. At first, he did exactly what was expected. He greeted Elon with a firm handshake, apologized for the misunderstanding, and assured the crowd that Tesla took these concerns seriously. We want every customer to feel valued, he said. That has always been our priority. Elon folded his arms. That's a nice statement, he said. It's also meaningless if nothing changes. Harrington hesitated. I understand your frustration, Elon. We can fix this, but it's best if we handle it internally. There's no need for this to turn into something bigger than it needs to be. There it was. The classic corporate strategy. Contain. Smooth over. Move on. Elon shook his head. It's already bigger than this showroom. The words hung there, unshakable. For the first time, Harrington's carefully controlled demeanor cracked. It was barely noticeable, a tightening around his mouth, a slight shift in his stance. Then what do you propose? He asked. Elon didn't hesitate. Robert Kane is fired, he said, effective immediately. A sharp intake of breath from Kane. But Elon didn't look at him. Every employee involved in this practice will be investigated. Elon continued. If they participated willingly, they're gone. If they were pressured into it, we find out who pressured them. Harrington opened his mouth, but Elon kept going. This showroom is shutting down until we rebuild it the right way. Every transaction from the past 2 years gets reviewed. And this isn't staying internal. A murmur spread through the crowd. Even some of the employees looked shocked. Harrington exhaled slowly. He glanced at Kane, then back at Elon. That's a drastic response. Elon met his gaze. Not as drastic as losing trust in the brand. Another long pause. Then, finally, Harrington nodded. All right. Kane made a noise in the back of his throat, somewhere between disbelief and fury. You're kidding, he muttered. You're actually letting him do this? Harrington turned to him, his expression cold. You brought this on yourself. A security guard stepped forward. Kane's shoulders sagged in defeat. The tension in the showroom didn't fade entirely. But there was a shift, a release. Customers watched as Kane was escorted toward the exit. Employees whispered among themselves, knowing that the way things had been run was about to change. Elon was about to turn away when his phone buzzed in his pocket. A new email. No sender name. No subject line. He opened it. One sentence. This isn't just one showroom. Elon stared at the screen. A slow realization settling over him. He had been right. This wasn't just a local problem. It was bigger. The email still lingered in Elon's mind as he walked into Tesla's corporate headquarters the next morning. The words weren't dramatic, nor did they offer any specific details. But their weight was undeniable. The thought followed him into the conference room, where a group of Tesla's top executives had already gathered. The long table was lined with polished black leather chairs, and the massive floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Bay Area, a stark contrast to the tension in the room. Some of the faces in front of him were familiar allies. Others were harder to read. Then there were those he already suspected would resist. He took his seat at the head of the table, fingers tapping lightly against the polished surface before he spoke. We have a problem, he said, his voice calm but firm. And we're going to fix it. A brief silence. Then one of the legal advisors leaned forward, adjusting her glasses. With all due respect, Mr. Musk, she said, if we go public with this, Tesla could be facing serious legal repercussions. Discriminatory practices fall under consumer protection laws, not to mention potential class action lawsuits. Elon cut her off with a small wave of his hand. I know the risks. He glanced at Michael Harrington, who sat 2 seats away, his expression carefully neutral. That's why we need to conduct a full-scale internal investigation before anyone else does it for us. Murmurs spread around the room. Some nodded, seeing the logic. Others shifted uncomfortably. A senior operations director cleared his throat. What exactly do you mean by full scale? Every showroom, every region, Elon said. I want reports on customer treatment, sales prioritization, and any internal policies that determine who gets access to which services. A long pause. Then, Michael Harrington leaned back in his chair. His fingers steepled. That's quite a sweeping move, he said. Are you sure we're not overreacting? We handled the issue with Kane. This doesn't need to become a company-wide scandal. Elon's gaze didn't waver. If it's just one showroom, why am I getting anonymous emails telling me otherwise? A flicker of something unreadable passed across Michael's face before he smiled. Anonymous emails aren't exactly hard evidence. Elon didn't blink, which is why we're going to find the evidence ourselves. Michael exhaled, leaning forward. Look, I understand the concern, but if we push too hard, we risk damaging Tesla's reputation. Maybe the better approach is to. Elon already knew where this was going. Handle it quietly? He finished for him. Michael hesitated, then gave a slow nod. It's about protecting the brand. We clean up what happened at that showroom, let go of the necessary people, and move forward. There's no need to drag the entire company into this. The words were calculated, reasonable, even, but Elon had built Tesla by going against what was reasonable. He let the silence stretch, then finally said, we're not solving the problem if we're just covering it up. Another pause. Then he turned to his executive assistant. Draft an email. It goes out to every Tesla employee by the end of the day. We're launching an internal review of all customer service practices. We'll accept full transparency from anyone who wants to come forward. No repercussions for speaking the truth. A shift in the room. Some executives nodded, reluctantly or otherwise. Others remained stiff, unreadable. Michael's jaw tightened. That's going to open a floodgate. Good, Elon said. That's exactly what we need. For the first time, Michael's carefully composed mask cracked. Just slightly. The meeting ended, and the executives filed out, some whispering to one another. Elon remained seated, his fingers drumming lightly against the table. A few minutes later, the door opened again. Michael Harrington stepped back inside, closing it behind him. Elon didn't look up. I assume you have something else to say. Michael took a slow breath. I think you should reconsider. Elon finally met his gaze. Why's that? Michael's voice was controlled, but there was something tighter beneath it. You dig too deep. You might find things you don't want to. Elon tilted his head slightly. Like what? A long pause. Then, instead of answering, Michael reached into his suit jacket and placed a folder onto the table. Elon glanced down. Inside were documents, financial reports, emails, and approval stamps on policy changes. At first, nothing stood out. Then he saw it. Michael's own signature, right next to Robert Kane's. Elon slowly closed the folder. I see, he said. Michael straightened his tie. We can manage this the right way. You don't want Tesla dragged into a bigger mess than necessary. Elon tapped the folder lightly. You already dragged it there. Michael didn't flinch. Then let's not make it worse. The words hung in the air. A quiet challenge. Elon exhaled slowly, then leaned forward. I told you, he said, voice steady. Tesla doesn't operate this way. Michael's expression didn't change, but his fingers curled slightly against the edge of the chair. So, Elon continued, locking eyes with him. Which side are you on? The silence that followed was thick with unspoken tension. Michael didn't answer right away. And that, more than anything, told Elon everything he needed to know. Michael Harrington sat across from Elon in the executive conference room, his fingers interlaced in a calculated display of calm. The large window behind him framed the San Francisco skyline. But he wasn't looking at the view. His focus was entirely on Elon. Reading his expressions, gauging his reactions. I had no choice, Michael said smoothly. The directive came from higher up. I simply ensured implementation. Elon didn't respond immediately. He let the silence settle, watching as Michael shifted slightly in his chair, adjusting his cuffs. It was a small movement, but it spoke volumes. Higher up, Elon repeated. That's convenient. Michael leaned back, exhaling through his nose. Look, I get it. You want to clean house. You think this is some grand betrayal of Tesla's values. But the reality is, we're running a business. Policies like this aren't about discrimination. They're about efficiency. Elon's expression remained unreadable. Michael pressed on. If you go public with this, if you start tearing everything apart, the consequences won't stop with a few bad headlines. The stock will plummet. Confidence in leadership will erode. And when that happens, certain board members will start asking questions about whether Tesla needs a new direction. The implication was clear. Elon leaned forward, clasping his hands together. Coca-Cola once changed its formula. He said, stock price crashed. They lost millions. Then they admitted they screwed up and fixed it. The brand survived. Michael tilted his head. That's a nice anecdote. Elon's voice remained level. Stock prices recover. Reputation doesn't. Michael studied him for a moment, then let out a quiet chuckle. You're not going to back down, are you? No. For the first time, something flickered in Michael's eyes, something sharp. Assessing. All right, he said, rising from his chair. Then I suppose we'll see how this plays out. Elon watched him leave, already knowing this wasn't over. The next morning, the headlines hit. Major news outlets ran variations of the same story: internal strife at Tesla, employee uncertainty, concerns over leadership decisions. Some reports framed Elon's crackdown as an overreaction, while others hinted at larger turmoil brewing within the company. One article, written under an anonymous byline, claimed that Tesla employees were in a state of panic, fearing mass layoffs due to the shakeup. Another suggested that Tesla's board was evaluating Elon's recent decisions and the impact they had on the company's financial stability. Elon knew exactly where it was coming from. Michael wasn't just playing defense, he was launching a full-scale attack. That same afternoon, Elon placed a call to Larry Benson, one of the company's most influential board members. The phone rang twice before the older man answered. Elon, Larry said, his voice even. I was wondering when I'd hear from you. I assume you've seen the news. Elon said, I have, Larry replied, and I assume you already know who's behind it. There's no assuming about it. A pause. You've made enemies, Larry said finally. Powerful ones. Elon exhaled. I need to know who's with me. Larry didn't respond right away. When he finally spoke, his tone was measured. There's a board meeting being organized, he said, unofficially, not on record, but the discussion will be about Tesla's direction and your leadership. The warning landed exactly as Larry intended. Elon didn't react outwardly. Michael's making his move. Larry sighed. He has allies. You know that, do you? Larry chuckled dryly. I believe in Tesla's future. Elon, that means I believe in you. But you need to be prepared. If you don't get ahead of this, they will come for your seat. Elon had anticipated resistance. But if Michael was already rallying board members, then this wasn't just about policy changes. It was about control. That evening, another email arrived. No sender, no subject. Inside was a single PDF attachment. Elon opened it. The document contained detailed outlines of showroom policies, not just the ones that had been uncovered, but others that had never been made public. There were instructions for regional managers on how to filter customers, internal reports discussing profitability metrics tied to service prioritization, and communications suggesting that the board had been aware of these practices for longer than anyone admitted. One section in particular caught his eye. Projected revenue impact if customer segmentation policies are removed. At the bottom of the page, multiple names were listed as recipients. One of them was Michael Harrington. Another belonged to a board member. Elon closed the document and stared at the screen. This wasn't just a battle against one executive. It was a war against a system deeply embedded within Tesla's leadership. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. He needed to change his strategy. Because this wasn't just about fixing a broken policy. It was about dismantling an entire network. The media storm was relentless. Every major outlet seemed to have a fresh angle on the Tesla controversy, each one more damning than the last. Elon Musk's reckless overhaul leaves Tesla in chaos. Tesla employees fear mass layoffs amid internal power struggle. Customers losing trust as showroom sales take a hit. Elon scrolled through the headlines, his expression unreadable. He had been through media attacks before. Criticism was nothing new. But this wasn't organic. It was coordinated. He glanced up from his desk as his assistant entered, a tablet in hand. Reports from multiple locations. She said, some customers are hesitating on purchases, citing concerns over Tesla's future. And we're getting calls from shareholders, lots of them. Elon nodded. They want reassurance. They want answers. She corrected. Some of them are asking if you plan to step down. He let out a quiet breath. Michael's making his move. His assistant hesitated. There's something else. She handed him the tablet, pulling up a report. It was a transcript from an off-the-record meeting between several board members. The topic was familiar: ensuring stability in Tesla leadership. Translation: finding a way to push him out. Michael Harrington was leading the charge. He had spent years cultivating relationships with key board members, ensuring that when the time came, he could rally them behind him. Elon had no doubt that Michael was already working the phones, persuading shareholders that his leadership was a liability. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. A junior executive stepped inside, looking uneasy. There's something you need to see. Elon followed him down the hall into a secured conference room. A laptop was already set up, a message waiting on the screen. Anonymous sender. No subject. Elon clicked it open. Michael isn't working alone. Below the text was an attachment. He opened it, revealing pages of internal documentation. At first glance, it looked like routine financial data, expense reports, showroom analytics. But then he saw it. Buried deep within the files was a pattern. Payments disguised as marketing incentives. Bonuses for showroom managers who prioritized high-value customers. Silent kickbacks for executives overseeing regional operations. It wasn't just a policy. It was a business model. And more importantly, it wasn't just Michael. Multiple high-ranking executives had signed off on the transactions, their names appearing again and again on approval documents. Elon scanned the list, his gaze narrowing as he reached the bottom. One of the signatures belonged to a board member. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then he pulled out his phone. We need to dig deeper, he said. Get my security team. I want access to every financial record linked to showroom operations. And send this to legal, quietly. His assistant nodded and rushed off. Elon sat back, exhaling slowly. Michael thought he had the upper hand. He was wrong. That night, in a secured office, Elon and his team worked in silence. They combed through Tesla's internal systems, searching for more evidence. At first, progress was slow, but then, in a restricted archive folder, they found something. A document labeled, Internal Client Segmentation Strategy. It was the blueprint for everything, the entire system of customer categorization, showroom prioritization, and the financial structure supporting it. The document confirmed what Elon had suspected. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was a coordinated effort spanning multiple levels of leadership. The final page held something even more damning. A list of names. Michael's, of course, but also 2 more board members, as well as several regional directors. Elon's grip tightened on the edge of the desk. Now he had them. The next morning, just hours before the scheduled board meeting, Elon sent the files to every executive at Tesla. Within minutes, chaos erupted. Some executives immediately distanced themselves, releasing vague statements about their commitment to ethical business practices. Others remained silent, waiting to see how the fallout would unfold. Michael Harrington, however, didn't panic. He had one final move to make. The boardroom at Tesla's headquarters was silent. The kind of silence that carried weight. Every seat was occupied, every executive present, their eyes fixed on Elon Musk as he sat at the head of the long conference table. A glass wall overlooked the city skyline, but no one was paying attention to the view. Michael Harrington sat near the other end of the table, his fingers tapping lightly against the armrest of his chair. He was composed, unreadable, but there was something in the set of his jaw that gave him away. He had spent years maneuvering for power within Tesla, and now he was making his move. Elon leaned back in his chair, his expression neutral as he watched the board members settle. Some exchanged glances, others sat stiffly, waiting for the meeting to begin. Michael was the first to speak. "We need to discuss the current instability within Tesla," he said, his voice smooth, carefully measured. "The recent turmoil, the media backlash, the uncertainty among investors, these are serious concerns." He folded his hands on the table. "Elon, we all respect your vision, but your recent actions have caused disruption. Stock prices have fluctuated, customers are losing confidence. We have a responsibility to protect the company." A few members nodded, others remained still. Michael continued, "The board must consider measures to stabilize Tesla. That includes reviewing decision-making processes, potentially shifting executive authority, and ensuring that no single individual jeopardizes the company's long-term success." He let the words hang in the air before delivering his final blow. "I propose a vote to reassess Elon Musk's executive control over Tesla." The reaction was immediate. Some members stiffened, others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. No one spoke. Elon exhaled quietly. He had expected this. "Interesting," he said finally. "You're calling for stability. Yet, you were perfectly fine when Tesla was maximizing profits through unethical means." Michael's smile didn't waver. "This isn't about the past. It's about moving forward." Elon nodded. "Good. Let's move forward then." He pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. A legal assistant at his side tapped a button, and the main screen at the front of the room lit up, displaying a series of documents. "Before anyone votes, let's take a look at what's really been happening inside Tesla," Elon said. The screen filled with financial records, payments labeled as incentives, showroom performance bonuses, internal emails approving policies that had prioritized wealthy customers while discouraging service to lower-income buyers. The evidence was damning. This wasn't a mistake, Elon continued. It was a system built to increase profits at the cost of our integrity. And it wasn't just the work of a few showroom managers. It came from the top. Some board members leaned forward, scanning the documents. A few exchanged whispers. Others sat frozen. Michael remained still, but his fingers tightened against the table. Elon let the weight of the revelation settle before delivering the next blow. "The names on these documents," he said, flipping to another slide, "include some of the very people sitting in this room." The tension in the air was thick. One of the senior executives, an older man who had been on the board for over a decade, shifted uncomfortably. Michael finally spoke. "Even if some mistakes were made, exposing them like this only harms Tesla's future. This kind of information could ruin us." Elon studied him. "The truth doesn't ruin companies. Corruption does." Michael exhaled slowly, then leaned forward. "You're willing to tear this company apart over an ideal?" Elon didn't hesitate. "I'm willing to fix it. And that starts with accountability." Michael knew he was losing ground. He had one last move to make. He sat back, letting the room breathe. Then, in a controlled voice, he said, "Then let's settle this now." A formal vote. A long pause followed. Then a voice spoke from the other end of the table. "Larry Benson, I'd like to say something," Larry said. All eyes turned to him. Larry was one of the company's largest shareholders, a man whose support could sway the entire board. He leaned forward, looking directly at Michael. "If we continue covering this up, the legal consequences will be far worse," Larry said. "Tesla isn't just another company. It's a movement. People believe in it. If we betray that trust, we won't just lose money, we'll lose everything." Some board members nodded, others hesitated. Michael's expression remained neutral, but there was a flicker of unease. Then, before he could respond, someone's phone buzzed. Then another. A low murmur spread across the room. Elon's assistant leaned toward him and whispered, "Something's leaked." Elon looked toward the main screen. A new email had just been forwarded to every board member. An anonymous source. Attached was a video file. Elon gestured for it to be played. The footage filled the screen, grainy, but clear enough. It showed Michael Harrington in a private meeting. His voice unmistakable. "We don't need poor customers. Tesla is a luxury brand. Let Musk chase his moral crusade. Once he's out, we'll bring things back to the way they should be." Silence. Every single person in the room had just heard the truth straight from Michael's mouth. A slow, chilling realization settled over the board. Michael's face had lost all color. One of the senior executives broke the silence. "Elon," he said carefully, "what do you want us to do?" Elon glanced at Michael, then back at the board. "We start by removing the people who betrayed this company." Michael opened his mouth, but for the first time since this battle had begun, he had nothing to say. The silence in the boardroom was suffocating. The only sound came from the faint hum of the overhead lights, interrupted by the occasional rustle of paper or the tapping of fingers against the polished mahogany table. Michael Harrington sat stiffly in his chair, his face locked in a tense expression. The video had just finished playing, and its impact was immediate. Around the room, board members exchanged uneasy glances. Some, who had previously backed Michael, sat frozen in their seats. Others looked away, unwilling to meet his gaze. Larry Benson was the first to speak. "I think we've heard enough." Michael forced a chuckle, though there was no humor in it. "This is absurd," he said, shaking his head. "You all know how easily these things can be manipulated. That video was edited. It was taken out of context." Elon remained silent, watching him. Michael spread his hands. "Do any of you really believe that I would say something like that? That I would jeopardize everything I've worked for?" The room remained still. Then, one of the senior board members, a man who had stayed neutral up until now, spoke up. "So, you're saying the video is fake?" Michael hesitated. "I'm saying it's misleading." Larry leaned forward, folding his hands on the table. "All right, let's say, for a moment, that the video is misleading. Can you explain why your name appears on multiple financial records linked to showroom discrimination policies?" Michael's jaw tightened. "Or," Larry continued, "why several showroom managers have come forward, confirming that they were pressured into following these policies under your direction?" A murmur spread across the room. Elon finally spoke. "I don't think we need to drag this out," he said. "It's time for a vote." Michael opened his mouth to protest, but Elon had already turned to the board. All in favor of removing Michael Harrington from his position and terminating his involvement with Tesla. Effective immediately? Larry raised his hand first. Then another. And another. One by one, hands went up across the room. The count was overwhelming. Michael's face darkened as he sat back in his chair, his hands gripping the armrests. Elon met his gaze. "Looks like the board has spoken." A long silence stretched between them before Michael let out a slow breath. Shaking his head, "You have no idea what you've just done," he muttered. Elon leaned forward slightly. "I think I know exactly what I've done." Michael let out a bitter laugh. "You think this ends with me? You think I was the only one?" Elon didn't answer. Michael stood abruptly, pushing his chair back. "You're naive if you think Tesla runs on ideals. This company, your company, was built on deals and strategy, not wishful thinking." Security had already entered the room, waiting near the exit. Michael took one last look around the boardroom, his gaze sweeping over the faces of his former colleagues. Then he turned to Elon, his eyes cold. "Enjoy your victory," he said quietly. "It won't last." With that, he walked toward the door. A guard stepped in front of him, stopping him just before he could leave. Michael turned sharply. "Get out of my way." The guard didn't move. "Sir, you need to return your access badge before exiting the premises." Michael clenched his jaw, then yanked the badge off his lapel, tossing it onto the table. As he walked out, the weight of his words lingered in the air. Elon exhaled slowly, then turned back to the board. "This doesn't end here," he said. "Michael was just one part of the problem. If we want Tesla to live up to its vision, we need real change." A few board members nodded. Others looked wary, as if still processing everything that had happened. Elon didn't wait for them to catch up. "We're launching a full-scale audit of internal policies," he continued. "Any employee found to have enforced discriminatory practices will be removed, effective immediately. We'll be revising showroom operations to ensure every customer is treated fairly." He paused, then added, "And from now on, Tesla will implement a direct feedback system. Customers will be able to report their experiences directly to leadership. No more hiding behind internal policies." The room remained silent. Then, slowly, Larry nodded. "This is the right move," he said. "It won't be easy, But it's the right move. Elon looked around the room. Any objections? No one spoke. He gave a final nod. Then let's get to work. As he left the boardroom, a thought lingered in his mind. Michael was gone. But the war for Tesla's future was far from over. The shift in public opinion was swift. In the days following the boardroom upheaval, media outlets that had once criticized Tesla's internal chaos now hailed Elon Musk's leadership as a bold stand for integrity. Headlines changed their tone. Elon Musk cleans house at Tesla. Pledges a new era of transparency. Tesla's customer-first revolution. A risky but necessary gamble. The backlash was still there. Investors worried about short-term instability. And some financial analysts questioned whether Musk's aggressive restructuring would affect Tesla's bottom line. But something was different now. Customers began voicing support. Social media flooded with stories from past buyers who had been dismissed or mistreated at Tesla showrooms, thanking Musk for exposing the problem. But behind the scenes, a new battle was brewing. A group of influential shareholders had requested a private meeting with Elon. The message was clear. They were concerned about Tesla's financial stability. The conference room where the meeting took place was much smaller than the boardroom. More intimate, more controlled. The 5 shareholders present weren't just investors, they were power players. Men who had backed Tesla for years. Who had watched the company transform from a struggling startup to an industry leader. And now, they wanted reassurance. One of them, an older man with silver hair and a deep voice, spoke first. Elon, we respect what you're doing. But we need to be realistic. Tesla isn't just about ideals, it's about business. And right now, business is at risk. Another nodded. We're not saying you shouldn't make changes. But this approach, mass firings, public statements, it's making some of us nervous. Stability is key. We need a steady hand to guide this transition. Elon listened, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. A third shareholder leaned forward. Here's what we're proposing. Pause the firings. Slow down the reforms. Let us manage the transition smoothly. That way, we don't scare off investors. And you still get to fix the problems. The message was clear. They wanted control. Elon exhaled slowly. He could see the logic in their argument. If he compromised, Tesla's financials would take less of a hit. The transition would be cleaner. Less resistance. But then his phone buzzed. A message. From an anonymous number. Check your email. He opened his inbox and saw it. A single attachment labeled, Internal Correspondence. He clicked it. The document detailed private conversations between a select group of shareholders. Some of the very ones sitting in the room with him now, and Michael Harrington. Emails exchanged months before Tesla's shake-up. Discussing ways to optimize showroom performance by targeting elite clientele, while discouraging lower-value transactions. And more importantly, a strategy for reinstating those same policies after Elon was out of the picture. His grip tightened around the phone. He looked up, scanning the faces in front of him. Some of these men had planned to restore the very system he was trying to dismantle. They had never intended to support real change. Elon set his phone down and leaned forward. Let me be clear, he said, his voice even. Tesla will never go back to the way it was. The room fell silent. I appreciate your concerns, but I won't slow down because some people are uncomfortable. This company was built on innovation, on risk. And I'm willing to take that risk. One of the men frowned. Elon, I'm not finished. He reached for a folder on the table and slid it across. These are the records of your conversations with Michael Harrington. The men stiffened. Elon continued. If you think I don't know what's been going on, you're mistaken. You weren't just concerned about stability. You were planning to bring back the old policies as soon as you had the chance. Elon let the weight of his words settle before delivering the final blow. I could handle this quietly, he said, or I could hold a press conference tomorrow morning, announcing exactly who tried to undermine Tesla's transformation. A long pause. Then, one by one, the shareholders stood. No arguments, no attempts at damage control. They simply nodded, stiffly, and left the room. The next morning, Elon held a global press conference. He stood before the cameras and declared Tesla's commitment to ethical business practices. He acknowledged the financial risks but reaffirmed that Tesla would not compromise its integrity for short-term gains. And then, He exposed the final piece of the puzzle. The leaked documents. The attempts by certain shareholders to reinstate discriminatory policies. The names. The media storm erupted instantly. Within hours, those involved distanced themselves. They resigned, sold their shares, or quietly withdrew from Tesla's affairs. The pressure was too great. Tesla's stock fluctuated. There was uncertainty. There was debate. But there was also trust. Customers rallied behind the decision. Employees who had once feared speaking out now felt empowered. Tesla's future wasn't just about selling cars anymore, it was about setting a new standard. That evening, as Elon left Tesla's headquarters, a cool breeze swept through the parking lot. He stood beside his Model S staring at the horizon. A voice interrupted his thoughts. "We just flagged a suspicious transaction," his assistant said, approaching. "A payment to a former executive. It looks like someone inside Tesla is still pulling strings." Elon exhaled, a small smirk forming at the corner of his lips. "The fight's not over," he murmured. Then he got into his car, started the engine, and drove into the night. The surface of Tesla's corporate empire appeared steady. Media coverage had shifted in Elon's favor. Customers expressed renewed trust, and internal reforms were well underway. But despite the apparent calm, a nagging instinct told him something was still wrong. And then, the anomaly appeared. His assistant had flagged it early that morning, a financial transaction. Small enough to avoid detection, but unusual in its destination. It led to an offshore account tied to a name Elon hadn't heard in a long time. Nathan Cross, a former Tesla executive. Nathan had once been a powerful force within the company's financial division. He had left Tesla over a year ago under the guise of an early retirement. But the records suggested otherwise. The account had received a deposit just days before Michael Harrington's downfall. If Nathan was still involved, it meant Michael hadn't been working alone. Elon leaned back in his chair, tapping his fingers against the armrest. "What do we know about Nathan's movements since he left?" His assistant swiped through a tablet. "He never really disappeared. He's been operating quietly under a financial consulting firm, one that specializes in high-value customer optimization strategies." Elon scoffed, a fancy way of saying discrimination. The assistant nodded. "And here's the real problem. Some Tesla showrooms are still following the same customer segmentation policies. Even after the reforms." Elon's gaze sharpened. "Who's giving the orders?" She hesitated. "We think it's Nathan. There's a meeting happening in 2 days with regional showroom directors. Off the books. If our intel is correct, he'll be there." Elon's mind was already working ahead. Michael had been the face of the scheme, the one willing to stand in the light. But Nathan had always preferred to stay in the shadows. If he was still pulling strings, then the fight for Tesla's future wasn't over yet. He exhaled. "We need to be in that meeting." His assistant hesitated. "That won't be easy. It's being held at a private location. No press, no recordings." Elon smirked. "Then we won't go as press." Later that evening, in a dimly lit office deep within Tesla's headquarters, a different kind of meeting took place. Elon sat across from an informant, an employee who had once worked under Nathan Cross. The man, visibly nervous, placed a file on the desk between them. "This is everything I have," he said quietly. "Emails, payment records, internal memos. Nathan never really left. He's been using former showroom executives to keep his system alive. They just shifted the structure underground." Elon flipped through the file. The evidence was clear. The same practices he had fought to dismantle were still active, just repackaged. Hidden beneath layers of bureaucracy. "Do you know where the meeting will be held?" Elon asked. The informant nodded. "A hotel in downtown Los Angeles. Only top executives have been invited. They're deciding whether to push back against your reforms or wait you out." Elon's jaw tightened. They still thought they had time. He leaned forward. "Tell me everything you know about Nathan Cross." The man hesitated. "Nathan, he doesn't like to lose." Elon already knew that, and if Nathan thought he could undo everything, he was about to be proven very, very wrong. 2 nights later, Elon stepped out of a blacked-out Tesla Model X, the city lights of Los Angeles reflecting off its sleek surface. The hotel stood tall in front of him, modern, exclusive, the kind of place where high-stakes deals were made behind closed doors. His assistant, standing beside him, gave him one last glance. Are you sure about this? Elon adjusted the cuff of his jacket. Absolutely. Inside, behind those doors, was a room full of people who still believed Tesla could be controlled by the same forces that had nearly driven it into corruption. They were wrong. Because this time, Elon Musk wasn't coming to negotiate. He was coming to end the game. Nathan Cross stood at the head of the long, polished table, his voice steady, his presence commanding. Around him, the room was filled with regional showroom managers and a handful of high-level investors who had quietly resisted Elon's reforms. The private suite at the upscale Los Angeles hotel was soundproof, ensuring that whatever was discussed here stayed within these walls. This company is going in the wrong direction, Nathan declared, placing his hands firmly on the table. Tesla was built on exclusivity, on premium branding. Musk is tearing that apart. He paused, scanning the faces before him. Some nodded, others hesitated. If we want to save Tesla from itself, he continued, we have to be strategic. We can't fight him directly, but we can restore what worked. Quietly, Nathan flipped open a folder, revealing a detailed document. This plan ensures that VIP clients continue receiving the priority service they expect, without raising any red flags. It's all about restructuring sales tactics. No one can accuse us of discrimination if we simply optimize the buying experience for high-value customers. Some of the showroom managers exchanged wary glances. Others leaned in, intrigued. We don't need to oppose Musk outright, Nathan assured them. We just need to outlast him. Eventually, the board will see reason. And when that happens, we'll be ready. The room was silent for a beat. Then the door opened. The tension thickened as every head turned. Elon Musk stepped inside. For a moment, no one moved. Nathan's face paled, but he quickly recovered, straightening his posture. What the hell is this? He demanded. Elon walked to the table. Calm, unhurried, without a word, he placed a thick folder on the polished surface. This, Elon said, tapping the folder, is everything I need to prove what you've been doing. Nathan's confidence wavered, but he forced a smirk. You have no authority here, Elon. Elon didn't react. Instead, he opened the folder. Inside were bank records, transactions traced back to Nathan's shell companies. Payments funneled through obscure accounts to showroom managers willing to keep the old system alive. Then came the emails, internal memos detailing exactly how Nathan had orchestrated the underground operation, instructing showrooms to continue prioritizing VIP clients while keeping lower-income buyers at arm's length. And finally, the recording. Elon's assistant tapped a button, and a familiar voice filled the room. Nathan's own words played back, recorded from an earlier conversation. We don't need Musk. We just need to hold out until he's out of the picture. The board will turn on him soon enough. When that happens, we reset the system and take back control. The silence was suffocating. Some of the showroom managers looked away. A few turned pale. Nathan, for the first time, had no response. Elon leaned forward slightly. Tesla has changed. You don't belong here anymore. Nathan's expression flickered between rage and desperation. You think you've won? I think you lost, Elon corrected. One of the showroom managers stood abruptly. I'm out, he said, stepping away from the table. Another followed, and another. Nathan's last remaining allies were abandoning him. Elon straightened. This is over, Nathan. Security stepped forward. Nathan's hands clenched into fists. But he said nothing as he was escorted out. The meeting was over. By the next morning, Tesla issued an official statement. The company denounced its past discriminatory practices and pledged total transparency in sales policies. A new oversight system was announced, allowing customers to directly report showroom experiences. Any employees found complicit in past discriminatory actions would face disciplinary action. Tesla's message was clear. The old system was gone. That evening, as Elon walked through Tesla's headquarters, a junior assistant hesitated before speaking. So, it's done? Elon smiled faintly. There's no such thing as done when you're changing a system. He stepped outside, the cool night air settling around him. The future was still uncertain. But for now, Tesla was finally moving forward. He climbed into his Model S, started the engine, and drove into the distance. At the heart of this story lies a powerful lesson. True leadership isn't just about innovation, it's about integrity. Elon Musk didn't just expose a broken system, he proved that real change requires standing up, even when it's easier to look the other way. But here's the real question. If the CEO himself hadn't stepped in, how long would this have continued? How many other industries operate under hidden rules, favoring the few while shutting out the rest? What do you think? Was this just one bad dealership, or a symptom of a much larger problem? Let us know in the comments. And if you love uncovering hidden truths, don't forget to subscribe to Undercover Truths for more eye-opening stories like this one.